A simple cube used for storing office supplies. Or is it? In his book, A Land Unknown, Hell's Dominion, Bryan Melvin describes miles and miles of cubes, each one containing a person suffering the same punishment they inflicted on others before they died. Next, on Stories of the Supernatural.
In 1980, I was a rough and ready kind of a guy. Drank a lot and partied a lot, and I was moved to Tucson, Arizona, and I was working at a construction site, and one of the guys brought some water from Mexico that was contaminated, and I ended up drinking it by accident. Got real sick, contracted cholera, and within about 72 hours I was flat on my back and basically dehydrated. That's when I passed away. I noticed that when I passed on, that of course I wear glasses and I'm very nearsighted. I noticed that, the first thing I noticed is that I wasn't wearing my glasses and I could see clearly across the room. And when I turned my head, I noticed that my body wasn't moving. And I was lifted right out of my body and hovered over my body, looking down at myself and looking around. And next thing I knew, I went through the ceiling of the room I was in, and I was transported into a very, very, very black, dark void. I could hear like somebody speaking to me, like telepathy. And it was explaining to me many, many things that I no longer remember, but most of the idea was explaining to you the whys of life, why there was evil in the world, why this, why, people have questions all the time. These were being answered to you as you were being transported to this light. And time you got to where the light was, you knew what happened. You know what's going on. You know what happened. You know you died. You know you're going to be judged. And everything as you're traveling, it's made so clear to you that what's happening is perfectly just and right. Oh yeah, I was going through the darkness and I was approaching the light there. And I noticed that on this rock, it was a big, huge boulder right out in the middle of this darkness. And there was a person sitting on a throne. And the individual that was sitting on it was emanating light, very, very powerful, bright light. And there was a love and compassion too, but also a firmness and fairness emanating from this person. And I'm going, who is this? And the basic question that was coming to me through this thought was, look what you have done with God's gift. It was actually Jesus was speaking this to me. He said, if I let you into heaven with what you know now, that I'm just, right, perfect, you would misuse that and keep sin alive in heaven. You can't come in. He told me it was granted to me to see a land unknown that's best forgotten, but will not be left unseen. That was it. And then he took out all these keys out of his robe, just pulled them out. And as he pulled them out, you could see the scar where the nails were kind of like in the wrist area, and it kind of pulled the bones apart. It's kind of traumatic looking. And he had these keys, and the keys were odd shapes and design. And he walked over to a place, and he stuck this key into this, looked like a gate. And a door opened. Then the veil came over, and it was dark again. I couldn't see it all. I could see it was the Lord. And I was being moved toward this door, and I went through that door into a void. I mean, a tornado vortex. It was just going round and round. It was a tunnel, spinning horrendously around, just roaring and roaring and spinning and spinning and spinning. And it smelled horrible. I could hear these screeches and noises and sirens. The most thing that I remember the most was slurping noises and screams, and you could feel heat, really hot heat. The next thing you know, I was falling through the sky. It looked like the sky, and I hit the ground. You know, it kind of hurt, and I stood up, and I looked, and I go, where am I? All these people ran out, and some of them looked like people that were dead that I knew, and other people I knew that were not dead. And they come around me, slapping me on the back. I said, they got there awful quick because the house looked far away, but all of a sudden they were there, slapping me on the back, welcoming me there. But something just wasn't quite right with them because they looked weird. They had yellow glints in their eye, and their eyes were almost reptile-like. I looked over and I saw what looked like my best friend turn into somebody else. And I said, hey, wait a minute, you can't do that. You're not who you say you are. Who are you? And then all of a sudden I looked around and I go, all these people around me are not people. They began to morph into what they were. They were ugliest creatures I've ever seen. Reptile-like, some of them, they were just god-awful, like rotting vegetables, and they were distorted and twisted, and then they were not perfect by no means. And they were just filthy, smelly creatures. And they were just starting to come at me like they're going to shred me to pieces. And one tried to grab me right across my chest, and one tried to grab my legs. And while they're trying to tear you to pieces, they backed away, and this one that looked like my best friend earlier, who morphed into different people, came up to me. It was it was about 4'8", looked like a sort of half dinosaur, a reptilian type creature, and it was hissing and spitting at me, and was speaking in a language that I didn't know what it was saying at first. I was telling, and it was broken in English. It was telling me to come, follow it, follow it, follow it. So he motioned to me, and we took a few steps, and all of a sudden we were at the end of the horizon. Now, that doesn't make any sense, but we came across to what looked like the end of the horizon. You couldn't go any further, and I couldn't understand what it was. And yet I could look out, and I could see all this vast fields and mountains. And then that creature stuck its hand in this horizon, and he ripped it open like a veil, and he stepped out of it up onto this road, and he telling me to come, motioning me to come, so I did the same. I just went ahead, I got up, and next thing I knew, I was on a large, wide, dusty, flat road. I just came out of a cell, a cube. It was around 10 by 10 foot square. It could have been 14 by 14. That's what the dimensions were. And there was a cell next to it, and there was a cells above it, kind of set back, concave, so they're going up. And there were 6 of them to the roof of this place. And in the walls are embedded peoples in cells. And he pointed to another cube, and in this cube I was looking at, there were people inside these cubes. Some were vacant, some people waiting for people to arrive like I did. There's this person in there, and I was just looking at them, and then it was showing me another person. Each person that was in their cube was like they were reliving parts of their life all over again, but not in a very pleasant way. It's like a living nightmare.
When we return, Bryan Melvin is taken deeper into hell, where he sees people in torment. Among them, one of the most notorious murderers in history. Next, on Stories of the Supernatural.